The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8463 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8463, a bill to establish government-wide requirements for prepayment fraud prevention actions to provide the U.S. Treasury appropriate data resources to facilitate participation in government-wide anti-fraud data sharing and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
And, Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer.
The gentleman is recognized.
As much time as he needs.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8463, the Prepayment Fraud Prevention and Treasury Data Access Act. Every year, the federal government loses hundreds of billions of dollars to fraud and improper payments. The Government Accountability Office estimates that the federal government has lost over $2.8 trillion since 2003 to payments that should have been made or were made incorrectly, payments that should have never been made or made incorrectly. Annual improper payments ballooned to nearly $236 billion in fiscal year 2023, more than 6 times the amount in 2003. The Government Accountability Office also estimates that the federal government loses between $233 billion and $521 billion annually to fraud across government programs. Fraud at these levels cost each tax filer on average between $1,000 and $3,000 per year. These losses should alarm each one of us and call us to action. The American taxpayer is covering the bill for fraud while criminals get rich. This bill takes meaningful steps to mitigate this problem by meaningfully curbing fraudulent payments and improper payments before funds go out the door and are lost forever. The Prepayment Fraud Prevention and Treasury Data Access Act enhances and expands government financial integrity controls by requiring anti-fraud risk evaluations to identify suspicious payments before agencies request a payment is issued by the U.S. Treasury. These reforms are centered around increasing the use and effectiveness of Treasury's existing do-not-pay system. It is currently only utilized by a mere 4% of eligible programs across the government. This bill will address the procedural hurdles agencies face in using the system and bring agencies into compliance with their required anti-fraud checks. The bill also lowers barriers for Treasury to bring additional non-sensitive data sets into the do-not-pay system. This legislation was drafted in coordination with privacy stakeholders to ensure appropriate data protection safeguards for personal and sensitive information. The reforms in this legislation are common sense and long overdue. I want to thank House Oversight Committee Ranking Member Garcia and his staff for working together with us to ensure such crucial legislation could advance on a bipartisan basis. I think we have a strong bill that will truly make a meaningful difference for the financial and program integrity of the U.S. government. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan reform bill, and I yield the balance of my time.
And I reserve.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also in support of H.R. 8463, the Prepayment Fraud Prevention and Treasury Data Access Act. This bill would help prevent improper payments by requiring that agencies verify with the U.S. Treasury that payments are going to the right place before they are made. Agencies would be required to use the Treasury's do-not-pay system to confirm that recipients, 1, have a valid Social Security number, 2, are not deceased, and 3, have a valid bank account. The bill would also impose heavy fines for any misuse of the do-not-pay system. This is a common sense change, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8463, the Prepayment Fraud Prevention and Treasury Data Access Act. With that said, I've got no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close, so I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close as well.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, H.R. 8463. Congratulations to the chair and the ranking member on their bipartisan work, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8463, the Prepayment Fraud Prevention and Treasury Data Access Act. As Chairman Comer, the bill's sponsor, explained, this legislation enhances and expands the government's financial integrity controls by codifying agency prepayment anti-fraud risk evaluations. This will help identify suspicious payments before they are sent out the door, stopping fraudulent or improper payments before they happen. In fiscal year 2025, the U.S. Treasury Department reported that they have helped agencies and states prevent and recover over $11 billion in fraudulent and improper payments. They've done this by using existing tools such as the Do Not Pay system. However, as the chairman explained, these systems are being drastically underutilized by federal agencies and are in need of certain reforms. We can only imagine the additional savings that H.R. 8463's reforms will help achieve by increasing the prepayment fraud prevention activities of federal agencies and increasing the utilization of the Do Not Pay system. I encourage my colleagues to support the bipartisan H.R. 8463 so we can protect taxpayers, ensure proper program integrity, and prevent fraud before it happens. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8463 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6916 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6916, a bill to amend Title 41 United States Code to identify individuals who commit certain federal felonies implicating federal programs as an excluded source on the System for Award Management Exclusions List and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act. The federal government pays a substantial amount of money to contractors for services to help agencies fulfill their missions. It's a privilege, not a right, to receive a contract, grant, loan, or other form of federal financial assistance. Unfortunately, there are individuals who take advantage of these resources and use it as an opportunity to defraud the government. This bill closes a glaring loophole by prohibiting individuals that are convicted of certain felonies, primarily defrauding the federal government, from receiving federal awards. Under H.R. 6916, fraudsters will no longer be able to get rich from taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. This bill requires these individuals to be listed on the General Services Administration Systems for Award Management Exclusion List, thus ensuring that federal agencies know who these individuals are to ensure they, or any entity of which they have a controlling interest, are not awarded a contract or grant. I thank the bill's sponsors, Congressman Keith Self and Congresswoman Emily Randall, a colleague on the House Oversight Committee, for bringing this common sense bill to the committee. I encourage my colleagues to support this necessary and bipartisan bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today also in support of H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act. This bill would automatically ban individuals and companies convicted of defrauding the government from receiving federal contracts, grants, and other federal financial assistance for 3 years. And I now yield my colleague, Representative Randall from Washington State, for 5 minutes.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act, bipartisan legislation that I'm proud to lead with Representative Self. This bill is rooted in a pretty basic idea. If someone is convicted of defrauding a federal program, they should not be able to turn around and keep doing business with the federal government. This isn't about politics. It's about protecting taxpayer dollars and making sure that the federal government is worthy of the trust that the people place in it. In every community we represent, people work hard, pay their taxes, and expect government programs to be run with honesty and accountability. Each year, the federal government awards more than $700 billion in contracts to various agencies. Taxpayers expect those dollars to support families, to strengthen communities, and to deliver the services Congress intended, not to go back to people who have already been convicted of abusing public funds. This issue was brought to us by the inspectors general, the public servants who spend every day rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government. They identified a real gap in the current system. Too often, individuals convicted of fraud involving the federal programs remain eligible to apply for and receive federal contracts. Under current law, agencies can suspend or debar these individuals, but the process can be slow, staff-intensive, and inconsistent. We have been told that preparing one single suspension or debarment package can take up to 20 hours. For agencies already operating with limited staff and growing backlogs, that means people who should be barred from federal contracts can slip through the cracks. That is exactly the kind of problem Congress should be working together to fix. According to a study by inspectors general of 550 felony fraud convictions involving pandemic-related federal program funds over a 3-year period, more than 95% of those convicted were not suspended or debarred from doing business with the government. That's unacceptable. Our bill creates a clear, common-sense standard. Individuals convicted of fraud involving federal programs would be automatically ineligible for federal contracts for at least 3 years. That means stronger accountability, more consistent enforcement, and more time for the inspectors general to focus on other cases of waste, fraud, and abuse. The American people are owed more accountability and transparency into what taxpayer-funded contracts are being approved. The Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act is a targeted, bipartisan solution to a documented problem. It protects taxpayers, it supports the work of the inspectors general, and it helps make sure federal dollars go where they are supposed to go. I'm grateful to the inspectors general who raised this issue and helped us develop this legislation, and I thank Representative Self for his partnership. I urge all my colleagues to support the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in favor of H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act of 2025. The American people expect their hard-earned tax dollars to be used responsibly. They should never have to worry that individuals convicted of defrauding the federal government, can turn around and receive additional federal contracts, grants, or loans. Unfortunately, we've seen too many examples of individuals exploiting federal programs for personal gain. One repeat fraudster submitted at least 22 fraudulent pandemic loan applications and additional fraudulent unemployment benefit applications, resulting in more than $250,000 in taxpayer losses. And that's only one case. It is common sense to expect that someone convicted of defrauding the government should not return and apply for more money. This bill closes that loophole. H.R. 6916 requires individuals convicted of specific federal fraud offenses involving federal programs to be placed on the System for Award Management Exclusion list for 3 years. In simple terms, if someone is convicted of stealing from, lying to, or defrauding the federal government, they will not be eligible to receive more federal dollars. This bill does not create new crimes. It does not expand federal spending. It simply ensures that individuals convicted of serious fraud involving federal programs are temporarily barred from receiving additional taxpayer funds. At a time when Americans are demanding greater accountability from their government, Congress should send a clear message. Taxpayer dollars are not an entitlement in the face of fraud. I want to thank the offices of Inspector General and the professionals who worked with my team throughout the development of this legislation. Their work investigating fraud and protecting taxpayer dollars is indispensable. I also want to thank Representative Randall for her partnership with this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6916. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman for Virginia is
Mr. Speaker,
recognized.
I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close. Mr. Speaker, as the sponsors of the bill mentioned, we have a responsibility to ensure that federal funds are spent wisely and go to Americans who truly need them. So I think it's pretty clear that if you commit fraud to steal from the federal government, you should not be rewarded with a federal contract or grant. So I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act. The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee's extensive investigations and hearings on fraud and federal programs have made one thing clear. If fraudsters are successful, they will continue to find new ways to steal taxpayer dollars. Such egregious actions require proactive fraud mitigation to prevent fraudsters and criminals from taking advantage of loopholes in our government and continuing to enrich themselves with taxpayer dollars. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 6916, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8467 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8467, a bill to reform the Payment Integrity Information Act of 2019 to ensure executive agencies focus on fraud prevention and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8467, the Zeroing Out Monetary Benefits Improperly Expended Act. This bill strengthens agency efforts to prevent improper payments that lead to financial loss to the government. Estimates made by the Government Accountability Office reveal that the federal government has lost $2.8 trillion to improper payments since 2003. In fiscal year 2025, federal agencies reported $186 billion in improper payments, an increase of about $24 billion from the previous year alone. These heinous findings prove that the status quo is not working and is unacceptable. This bill replaces the current broken practice of conducting backward-looking annual improper payment estimates that remain unchanged year to year. Instead, it directs agencies to focus more closely on payments that result in financial loss to the government and cost savings associated with anti-fraud activity. This bill requires agencies to comprehensively assess fraud risk management practices in their programs, such as the implementation of the Government Accountability Office's Fraud Risk Management Framework, and to develop fraud risk indicators and apply key fraud risk controls and procedures. The bill also increases much-needed regular coordination and information sharing among government stakeholders responsible for identifying and preventing improper payments. I want to thank my Oversight Committee colleague, Congressman Gary Palmer, for leading on these important and long overdue improper payment reforms. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today also in support of H.R. 8467, the Zeroing Out Monetary Benefits Improperly Expended Act. The bill is simple. It would require the Treasury to develop risk assessment guidance for improper payments. It also requires federal agencies to conduct a risk assessment and publish a prioritized list of programs at risk for fraud. Federal agencies with the highest risk of fraud and improper payments would be required to report on the steps they are taking to resolve those risks. These are common sense measures to help prevent improper payments and promote accountability within federal agencies. I thank my colleagues for their work on this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, hardworking Americans dutifully pay their taxes to support federal public programs and other priorities. Unfortunately, the federal government has too often squandered their money through mismanagement. For example, just last year, the federal government lost an estimated $186 billion in improper payments. 6 years ago, the COVID-19 pandemic produced what is now often referred to as the greatest theft of taxpayer funds in history. This is not new. The federal government has been on this track for over 23 years, losing almost $3 trillion in taxpayer dollars since that time. The definition of insanity is continuing to take the same actions and expecting a different result. It's time for us to make changes. Absent major systematic reforms, we will continue to violate the public trust to increasingly unsustainable levels. That's why I'm pleased to sponsor H.R. 8467, the Zeroing Out Monetary Benefits Improperly Expended, or Zombie Act. The Zombie Act reforms federal law to prevent improper payments before the money goes out the door. It codifies a long-time recommendation from the Government Accountability Office to conduct regular risk assessments of improper payments that result in actual financial loss to the federal government. Assessments will focus on a comprehensive review of risk, including implementing fraud prevention best practices. The bill also increases coordination among the inspectors general, the U.S. Treasury, and other partners via annual meetings. Heads of federal agencies or a designee of their choice will have the option to attend these meetings to help identify and prevent improper payments that result in financial loss for the government. Additionally, the Zombie Act incentivizes federal agencies reporting by permitting up to 75% of the amount recovered to be redirected back to the program. That's an increase from the current 25% threshold. By implementing the Zombie Act, agencies will be able to shift their focus toward preventing improper payments rather than on compliance activities. I thank my Democratic colleagues for supporting this bill and urge all my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the sponsor of the bill. I commend him on his creativity with acronyms of bill names, and I urge everyone to support the Zombie Act. It's very much alive, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8467, the Zeroing Out Monetary Benefits Improperly Expended Act, which reforms the Payment Integrity Information Act to refocus federal agencies on proactively identifying and preventing improper payments before they happen, rather than wasting resources on backward-looking compliance activities. We need reforms like this bill that force agencies to focus on preventing improper payments in the first place, and this smart legislation does just that. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8467 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present, and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8466 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8466, a bill to require certain agencies to develop plans for internal control in the event of an emergency or crisis and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8466, the Taxpayer Resources Used in Emergencies, or True Accountability Act. This bill takes action to ensure agencies are prepared to protect taxpayer dollars during future national emergencies when federal agency programs and spending are often rapidly expanded by supplemental emergency spending packages advanced by Congress. Between March 2020 and March 2021, Congress enacted a series of 6 laws providing over $4.6 billion in federal funds to mitigate the economic and public health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The unprecedented expansion of government programs and lack of commensurate and adequate fraud prevention and financial management capabilities created a perfect scenario for existing program and payment integrity weaknesses to be exploited. In short, agencies rushed to get money out the door as fast as possible, and in some cases loosened the guardrails to make funding access easier and more efficient. While the true extent of pandemic relief fraud may never be known, the Comptroller General of the United States observes that hundreds of billions of dollars in potentially fraudulent payments were dispersed. The True Accountability Act requires that agencies are prepared for future emergency supplemental spending legislation. Specifically, the bill requires the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance and for agencies to develop plans for internal controls for use in future emergencies. It is imperative that federal agencies and programs have strong financial controls in place from the start rather than developing them after the fact as funding is already flowing out the door during a national emergency. This bill will help mitigate fraud in future national emergencies. I thank my Oversight Committee colleague, Congressman Andy Biggs and Suhas Subramanian for championing this necessary and forward-looking legislation. I encourage my colleagues to support this important bipartisan bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 8466, the Taxpayer Resources Used in Emergencies Accountability Act. I'm proud to be a co-lead of this legislation with my colleague, Representative Biggs, and I thank him for his work on this issue. This bill would require federal agencies to develop internal control plans for future national emergencies, and in times of disasters, pandemics, and other crises, it is crucial that the emergency federal spending reaches the people who need it the most. Emergency assistance can save small businesses from closing, protect public health, provide people displaced by disasters with housing, and much, much more. But unfortunately, bad actors can take advantage of these situations to commit fraud and steal funds. Every cent that's stolen doesn't reach the Americans who need it. Having an internal control plan will help federal agencies develop strategies to mitigate those risks. And this is a common sense, bipartisan solution that will ensure that agencies like FEMA and the Small Business Administration are better prepared for the future. That way, we can ensure that emergency funds reach the people who need it quickly. An effective response to a national emergency starts with advanced planning, and that is what this bill does. I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 10 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding time to me. Over the past few months, the Oversight Committee has taken the lead on investigating a staggering amount of fraud. A common theme we've seen in this fraud has been bad actors taking advantage of emergency funds from the government. Agencies disperse money from these taxpayer-funded accounts to help those in need when an emergency, such as the COVID pandemic, caused major disruptions in the day-to-day lives of Americans. Emergency relief funds are meant to help families stay afloat in a crisis. Instead, a lack of planning by and failures of oversight of federal agencies have turned these emergency funds into a jackpot for fraudsters. For example, a central point of Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's oversight hearing dealt with his ties to the criminals in the Feeding Our Future scheme. That scheme involved more than $250 million in taxpayer money being stolen by the Feeding Our Future organization, which defrauded USDA's COVID programs. What became glaringly evident in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic was that government agencies were not properly equipped to deal with emergency relief funds. Even those in government, such as Minnesota's Attorney General Ellison, have failed to investigate and even potentially aided fraudsters abusing these funds. It was one of the largest COVID-era fraud schemes in the country, and it happened right under the nose of Minnesota's top law enforcement officer. That's why we need to make sure emergency relief funds are protected from fraud. In total, the Government Accountability Office estimates that a staggering 19 different pandemic relief programs were defrauded from 2020 to 2024 to the tune of $300 billion. And what's even more disturbing, that was just the fraud in COVID-related programs. In addition to COVID-related fraud, the Government Accountability Office also estimates that the government may lose as much as $521 billion. That's not waste. That's not error. That is a heist of historic proportions. These numbers are practically unfathomable, yet here they are staring us as a reality. We quite literally cannot afford as a country to be losing that amount of money per year to fraudsters. Our national debt is nearing $39 trillion. That's why I joined my Democrat colleague, Representative Subramaniam, close, yeah, sorry, and we introduced the True Accountability Act together, and that passed out of the Oversight Committee unanimously. The True Accountability Act is simple. It tells federal agencies, plan ahead, protect taxpayer dollars, and stop treating fraud as an afterthought or cost just built into the system as a feature. Because it's time to bring some accountability to our government so that we stop losing untold amounts of hard-earned taxpayer money. This act forces government agencies to be better prepared for an emergency, requires them to make internal plans that incorporate data-driven frameworks such as the GAO's, a framework for managing improper payments in emergency assistance programs, or a framework for managing fraud risk in 20 federal programs. These plans will include policies and procedures to assess risk of improper payments and fraud and related mitigation strategies, as well as to identify a senior official responsible and accountable for implementing the plan. These internal plans will go a long way in combating any potential fraud that might occur when emergency relief funds are dispersed. We must not be caught off guard the next time an emergency hits. In an emergency, people's lives are already upended. They don't need also to be worrying about fraudsters looting the federal treasury. We need to be ready to act in an efficient manner that protects taxpayer dollars. This is a common sense, bipartisan effort that both sides of the aisle can easily agree on, and it must be passed to safeguard the hard-earned money of American taxpayers. Fraudsters learned from the COVID era. With this bill, next time, we'll be ready for them, not the other way around. And I yield back.
No reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank the sponsor again for co-leading this bill with me. I'll say that I lived in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit the city, and there was a lot of fraud related to the money dispersed there afterwards. This has been a long-standing problem for many decades across Democratic and Republican administrations, and so I'm glad that we're taking steps in a bipartisan way to address this issue to make sure there is less fraud. These internal control plans, while they don't seem exciting, they're very effective. I've done them at private companies, and I think these federal agencies will benefit from them. So I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8466, the True Accountability Act, which will mitigate future fraud like we have recently experienced in the pandemic-era emergency spending. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8466 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8340 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8340, a bill to modify the government-wide financial management plan and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8340, the Taxpayer Funds Oversight and Accountability Act. It's no secret that weak internal controls and agency inaction on known fraud risks enables fraud. Federal agency chief financial officers play a vital role in the financial management of their agencies, but unfortunately their roles are frequently undefined, and their positions are often left vacant. Stakeholders in financial management have been calling for agencies to establish clear accountability and governance structures for program integrity, including designating an accountable senior official. The Taxpayer Funds Oversight and Accountability Act ensures each agency chief financial officer is responsible for overseeing and providing leadership on risk management and internal controls. Specifically, the bill requires chief financial officers to identify key information, such as spending and reporting on improper payments, and assess the effectiveness of internal controls annually. This ensures that a top-level official is responsible for effective and targeted financial management. In the event of a vacancy, this bill enables a deputy CFO to serve as an interim CFO, an important change that allows for leadership continuity over agency financial management. I thank my Oversight Committee colleagues, Congressman Dave Min and William Timmons, for championing this smart legislation. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today also in support of H.R. 8340, the Taxpayer Funds Oversight and Accountability Act. This bill would make a number of improvements to financial management at federal agencies, and I want to yield to my colleague, Congressman Min, from minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak in favor of H.R. 8340, the Taxpayer Funds Oversight and Accountability Act. I introduced this legislation alongside Representative William Timmons, and I want to thank him again for co-leading this important bill to promote efficiency and optimization in federal agencies. I would like to note that this legislation was originally led by former ranking member Jerry Connolly, and I'm proud that I can help carry forward this tool and hopefully continue forward his legacy of trying to improve the way that our federal government functions. This legislation is straightforward. It's designed to modernize how federal agencies track spending, strengthen financial oversight, and improve accountability in how the federal government manages our precious taxpayer dollars. This bill makes long overdue updates to the decades-old Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990, incorporating long-standing recommendations from the GAO to ensure that agencies can make better management decisions, improve efficiency, and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. For example, this legislation would require federal agencies to annually assess financial reporting internal controls, link agency performance and cost data to enhance financial evaluations, and prioritize the elimination of duplicative systems and unnecessary spending. As someone who started my career at the Securities and Exchange Commission tracking fraud in the private sector, I think it's important we also try to prevent fraud in the public sector as well, and I think this bill would take an important step forward in achieving that goal. Congress has to play an active role in reducing waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can do so by ensuring the federal agency chief financial officers are responsible stewards of taxpayer money. I'm confident this legislation will play an important role in doing so, and I urge my colleagues to support this common sense legislation. With that, I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I reserve as well.
Gentleman reserves.
I'm prepared to close, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as the gentleman from California mentioned, this is a great accountability bill. It requires the federal government to create a government-wide financial management plan for every 4 years and increases the responsibilities of agency CFOs to implement those plans. It's common sense and bipartisan. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8340, the Taxpayer Funds Oversight and Accountability Act, which implements important reforms for improving agency financial management planning. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8340 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative,
Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8107 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8107, a bill to require the establishment of a list identifying program areas and administrative practices presenting the greatest risk to the integrity of the federal funds administered by states and local governments.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8107, the Government Audit and Accountability of Federally Funded State-Administered Programs Act. The reforms of H.R. 8107 represent a long overdue step to ensure Congress is fully informed about fraud risks in federal programs administered at the state level. This bill requires the Government Accountability Office to assess program areas and administrative practices that present the greatest risk to the integrity of federally funded programs administered by states and local governments. This assessment will bring together the typical program-specific assessments to help Congress and other officials better identify common risks. With this information, Congress can bolster its oversight of agencies' states' efforts to efficiently mitigate fraud risks, including through payment integrity controls. This legislation will better position Congress to assist federal agencies and state and local governments to obtain the fraud prevention and investigative resources they require. I thank my Oversight Committee colleagues, Congressman Ro Khanna and Tim Burchett, for championing this helpful legislation that will help lawmakers understand state-level program risks and inform future fraud prevention reforms. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan and common-sense bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise in support of H.R. 8107, the Government Audit and Accountability of Federally Funded State-Administered Programs Act. I now yield to my colleague from California, Representative Khanna, for 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Congressman Subramanian.
Gentleman is recognized.
I appreciate the House taking up the Government Audit and Accountability of Federally Funded State-Administered Programs Act. It's a long way of saying this is a bill to go after fraud. I thank Congressman Tim Burchett for his partnership on this bipartisan legislation. I also thank Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Garcia, Congressman Gill, Congressman Subramanian, and my staff lead, Selene Seja, and Kevin Fox, my legislative director, for their help advancing this effort. The bill is straightforward. It directs the Government Accountability Office to conduct an independent review of federal programs that states administer on behalf of working families. Congress has a responsibility to ensure that every tax dollar reaches the people and communities these programs are intended to serve. To do that, we need facts, data, and evidence. The legislation helps us better understand how these programs operate across states, where vulnerabilities may exist, what practices are working, and what improvements Congress should consider to stop fraud. At its core, the bill is about prevention, accountability, and good governance. By directing the GAO to identify effective tools, technical assistance, and proven practices, we can help states strengthen program administration before problems occur. And it applies to all 50 states, so there's no politics in it. The families who rely on these programs deserve services that are efficient, reliable, accessible, and protected. Tackling fraud is not a partisan issue. Congress needs to continue bipartisan, evidence-based effort to better understand how federal funds flow through state-administered programs and how we can strengthen those systems. I again want to recognize Congressman Tim Burchett for his extraordinary leadership here and partnership. This bill gives us the information we need to make informed decisions and strengthen the public trust. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the great gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate your abilities at shortstop as well. And Mr. Ro thank you. I've never heard the words extraordinary leadership attached to the name Tim Burchett before, and I want to thank you for that, brother. Thank you so much for including me in this bill. And I rise, of course, in support of the Bipartisan Government Audit and Accountability of Federally Funded State-Administered Programs Act. This bill directs the Comptroller General, or our good friends at the Government Accountability Office, to produce recurring assessments of federally funded state-administered programs. This report will compare trends across states and identify programs and administrative practices most vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse in state and local administration of federal funds. Every year, approximately $1.1 trillion of taxpayers' dollars are administered by state and local governments. The money is administered with little or no oversight from the federal government. And how many times have we heard, y'all need to audit those folks? Well, this does just that. By requiring the GAO to monitor and report on trends across states, we will begin to see which administrative practices are most vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse. Recently, we have seen fraud run rampant at all levels of government. It's time that we mandate oversight so the American people know where the taxpayer dollars are going. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an obligation to our constituents to protect their hard-earned money. We have an obligation to make sure that government is working for the people. We have an obligation to actually do something, dadgummit, to rid government of waste, fraud, and abuse. It starts today with voting yes on this bill. Again, I'd like to thank my good friend, Representative Ro for his support in rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, and I again urge my colleagues to pass this bipartisan piece of legislation. I yield back. Thank you, Chairman Gill.
No reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is an important step towards preventing fraud and improper payments before they happen. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Approximately $1.1 trillion of taxpayer dollars are administered annually by state and local governments with little to no comprehensive and recurring oversight from the federal government or Congress. H.R. 8107 would require the Government Accountability Office to study the specific risks associated with federally funded state-administered programs and enable Congress to track emerging fraud patterns before they become billion-dollar scandals. I therefore encourage my colleagues to support the Government Audit and Accountability of Federally Funded State-Administered Programs Act and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8107 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 8428 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8428, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to establish a mandatory anti-fraud and improper payment training program for federal program administrators to provide for the availability of such training to state and local entities administering federally funded programs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 8428, the Federal Fraud Prevention Workforce Training Act. Every year, billions of taxpayer dollars are lost to increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes. Unfortunately, the increasing sophistication of fraudsters and criminals is outmatching the capabilities of federal agencies that work to safeguard taxpayer funds. H.R. 8428 identifies this expanding challenge and helps bolster the financial defenses of our federal programs against malicious actors. Specifically, it authorizes the U.S. Treasury to establish a government-wide anti-fraud training program for agency officials, like grant managers and auditors, so they are adequately trained on best practices for preventing and addressing fraud in agency programs. The bill also allows the U.S. Treasury to provide the training program to state and local agencies administering federally funded programs at no cost. This training will help ensure agency program management and state-level officials are better equipped to confront the challenges associated with fraud and improper payments by better utilizing the tools and best practices already established. Such tools include more fully implementing agency fraud risk prevention frameworks into program administration and fully utilizing Treasury's Do Not Pay system. This is important and forward-looking legislation, and I applaud my Oversight Committee colleagues, Congressman Glenn Grothman and Raja Krishnamurthy, for their work on these reforms. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan and forward-looking bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 8428, the Federal Fraud Prevention Workforce Training Act. This bill would establish programs to train federal workers to identify the risks of fraud and improper payments. And I now yield to my colleague, Mr. Krishnamurthy from Illinois, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Congressman Subramanian. Thank you, Congressman Gill. Thank you, Congressman Grothman, for being a partner on this bill. H.R. 8428, the Federal Fraud Prevention Workforce Training Act. Legislation that would address a central concern of the American people, which is fraud and waste in government. Every dollar lost to fraud is a dollar that cannot be used to serve the American people. Yet over the last 20 years, at least $3 million in improper payments have been made by the American government. Our bipartisan bill protects taxpayer dollars by creating a universal federal training program to fight fraud. By giving our government employees the tools that they need to identify fraud and avoid spending mistakes, we can stop waste before it happens. Accountability to the American people is not optional, it is required. And I'm proud to support policies that keep our federal programs strong and that use taxpayer dollars responsibly. I urge my colleagues to support this key legislation, and I thank the bill sponsors and Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Garcia for bringing this to the floor today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in support of the Federal Fraud Prevention Workforce Training Act. It's a bipartisan bill that strengthens fraud prevention efforts across the federal government. Americans work hard for their money. They pay their taxes, follow the rules, and expect the federal government to treat every dollar with care. Unfortunately, fraud in federal programs remains far too common, and too often it could have been prevented. The problem is not only the bad actors who try to steal from the taxpayer. Too many federal employees and program administrators are left without training, guidance, or tools they need to identify risk before taxpayer dollars go out the door. The bill takes a common sense step to fix that. The Federal Fraud Prevention and Workforce Training Act directs the Department of the Treasury, in coordination with OMB and OPM, to establish a standardized government-wide fraud prevention training program. That training would help federal employees identify fraud risk, implement proven anti-fraud practices, and make better use of existing tools, including the Do Not Pay system. It would also make these resources available to state and local governments that administer the federal funds. That last point is important. Many federal programs are not administered only in Washington. They depend on state and local partners who are often on the front lines and don't have any skin in the game. If we want to protect taxpayer dollars, those partners need access to the same knowledge and best practices the federal government has. Every dollar lost to fraud is a dollar that cannot help a veteran, a senior, a small business, a family in need, or a community that depends on federal assistance, or pay down our ridiculous federal debt. It's also a dollar added to the debt and a dollar taken from hardworking Americans who expect better from their government. We should not wait until fraud has already occurred to ask what went wrong. We should train the federal workforce to identify warning signs early, use the tools already available, and stop fraud before taxpayer dollars are wasted. I want to thank Congressman Krishnamurthy for leading the bipartisan effort with me. I also want to thank Chairman Comer for his leadership on oversight and his work to hold the federal government accountable. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Preventing improper payments and fraud starts with a well-trained workforce. I thank my colleagues for their work on this important legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8428, the Federal Fraud Prevention Workforce Training Act. In order to meaningfully address the massive scale of fraud in federal programs, we need to implement a standardized government-wide training program for employees administering agency programs. H.R. 8428 helps establish leading fraud prevention training practices throughout the federal government so we can recognize and prevent fraud before it happens. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8428 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
The yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise or remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 428 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 428, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to enhance the authority under which federal agencies may pay cash awards to employees for making cost-saving disclosures and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 428, the Bonuses for Cost Cutters and Fraud Preventers Act. This bill expands existing incentives for federal employees to identify and disclose waste and abuse before American tax dollars are spent. Without incentives to disclose wasteful spending, federal employees who are most likely to identify and halt such spending may not speak up. It was because of instances like these that in 1981, Congress created a cash awards program to encourage employees to take proactive action to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. This program was so successful that it was made permanent just over a decade later. Over the years, these authorities have resulted in creative ideas coming from agency employees themselves, contributing to the saving of millions in taxpayer dollars. These cost-cutting ideas included allowing veterans to use otherwise safe discarded medicine and eliminating wasteful printing of the Federal Register. It is time that Congress does more to expand the cost-saving potential of federal employees by expanding these authorities. H.R. 428, as amended, increases incentives for federal employees by allowing cash awards for reporting wasteful spending and improper payments before funds go out the door. The best way to recover misspent tax dollars is to not misspend them in the first place. I support this important legislation, which helps preserve Congress's constitutional role in the appropriations process and helps reduce wasteful spending. I thank Congressman Chuck Fleischman for bringing this creative solution to preventing fraud to the Oversight Committee and for working with the committee to expand it to address improper payments. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 428 as well, the Bonuses for Cost Cutters and Fraud Preventers Act. This bipartisan bill would increase the maximum cash bonus awarded to federal employees who report waste, fraud, and abuse from $10,000 to $20,000. Increasing this award will encourage more federal workers to come forward and report on waste and improper spending, and it will reward employees for acting in the best interest of American taxpayers. The bill also requires agencies to report on the wasteful and improper spending reported by employees and promoting transparency. I thank my colleagues for their work on this bill and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fleischman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the ranking member. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. Let me begin by stating a straightforward fact. The federal government spends excessively, and much of these funds are wasted. The Bonuses for Cost Cutters Act offers a practical solution to ensure that taxpayers' hard-earned dollars are managed wisely and efficiently. This legislation takes our existing federal awards program, a program that already rewards employees who identify fraud, waste, and mismanagement, and expands it. Under this legislation, any federal employee who identifies wasteful operational expenses that an agency itself determines are not required for its stated purpose can bring that information forward. The agency will then be required to propose those funds for rescission. On top of that, we double the maximum cash award available to employees who identify wasteful spending. Federal employees are often the first to recognize when funds are allocated to outdated programs or when bureaucratic practices prioritize institutional interest over those of taxpayers. For too long, there has been no incentive to speak up, and in some cases, real disincentives have existed. This bill addresses that issue. Tennessee's 3rd District, my district, is home to thousands of dedicated federal employees at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and other federal sites throughout our region. These hard-working public servants take their responsibilities to taxpayers seriously. H.R. 428 honors their commitment by giving them a meaningful role in eliminating waste and rewarding them for delivering results to the people who fund our government. We are taking these steps at a critical moment. The American people have given us a clear mandate to rein in spending. This administration is actively working to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government. The efforts by the Department of Government Efficiency reflect the same mandate, and H.R. 428 supports that mission by establishing a permanent statutory framework that will endure beyond any one administration. It's also important to emphasize that this is not a partisan bill. Taxpayers in Tennessee and across the nation, regardless of party, do not want their money wasted. They expect a government that is accountable, efficient, and worthy of their trust. I've worked on this legislation for years, and I'm proud that the Oversight Committee has advanced it. To my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, this is a common-sense, fiscally responsible, pro-taxpayer bill. I urge support, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Increasing the bonus for identifying waste, fraud, and abuse will save taxpayer dollars, make government more efficient, reward honest workers, and increase accountability. Thank my colleagues again for this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 428, the Bonuses for Cost Cutters and Fraud Preventers Act, which establishes additional incentives for federal employees to identify wasteful expenses or improper payments. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 428 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. New York. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6028, the Legislative Branch Agencies Clarification Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6028, a bill to modify the appointment and removal process for certain legislative branch officers and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli, each will control 20 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of my bill, H.R. 6028, the Legislative Branch Agencies Clarification Act, as amended. I'd like to thank Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli for their support and commitment to getting this important Article I bill to the floor. Now, a lot has been done on this bill. We've been working on it for probably a year or a little bit more, and it would not be in the position it's in today. It would not be as good a bill without the work that was done by committee staff on both sides of the aisle and by Mr. Morelli's input and others who have helped perfect this bill. I think we got a darn good bill here. This legislation makes important and long overdue reforms to key institutions that serve Congress and the American people, including the Library of Congress, the Government Publishing Office, and the United States Copyright Office. At its core, this bill is about ensuring that agencies of the legislative branch are governed in a manner consistent with our constitutional system, improving continuity in leadership and strengthening congressional oversight. I've long been concerned by the fact that certain functions and agencies that exist to support Congress remain subject to appointment structures rooted in the legislative branch. For many years, I've worked to address similar constitutional inconsistencies. In fact, and I think I'm the only one that loves this bill, since 2016, various times I've introduced legislation to transfer the office of the United States Trade Representative from the executive branch back to Congress, where I believe it belongs properly under our constitutional framework. But that's not this bill. H.R. 6028 is our bill, and it's guided by that same principle. The bill seeks to promote institutional balance amongst our co-equal branches of government and ensure congressional support agencies remain accountable to the branch they serve. The Library of Congress and the Government Publishing Office play indispensable roles in helping Congress carry out its legislative responsibilities. Yet the heads of these legislative branch agencies are currently appointed by the executive branch, by the President, and then confirmed by the Senate. Now, this is an arrangement that came about in the latter part of the 19th century. It's a 19th century construct. I don't know for sure, Mr. Speaker, but I suspect that it had to do with time and distance and the fact that a lot of times Congress was not able to get here to do the oversight that it needed. Those constraints that existed in the latter part of the 19th century due to electronic communication and easier travel no longer make that necessary. And I think that's why they did this flip where they gave up legislative power to the executive branch. And so we've created a new structure. And this structure the old structure created an inconsistency in governance, and the new structure helps us with certainty and accountability. The legislation updates the process by establishing a congressional appointment framework for the librarian of Congress and the director of the government printing office, or publishing office, excuse me. Under the bill, bipartisan recommendations will be provided by the leadership of the House Administration Committee, the Senate Rules Committee, with final selections being made by congressional leadership. The model is not unprecedented. It closely follows the appointment process Congress previously adopted for the architect of the Capitol, a reform enacted on a bipartisan basis, and the one that has helped strengthen congressional control over a key legislative branch institution. My bill also addresses the governance of the United States Copyright Office. Because the Copyright Office carries out executive-type functions, H.R. 6028 provides that the Register of Copyrights will be appointed by the President with advice and consent of the Senate. Now, some of the improvements that were made just within the last couple of months made sure we had a smooth working there because the Copyright Office, while it's an executive branch, has to work closely with the Librarian of Congress. And I believe the language that was ironed out between the parties makes a lot of sense and works well for the American people. My bill better aligns government responsibilities with the appropriate constitutional framework. Ultimately, the bill is about clarity, accountability, and good governance. By modernizing leadership structures and clarifying lines of authority, we can strengthen the institutions that support Congress and serve the nation as a whole. And we can ensure that these institutions are positioned to serve both Congress and the American people more effectively for years to come. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6028, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, sir. I rise in support of H.R. 6028, the Legislative Branch Agencies Clarification Act. The bill updates the appointment process for the heads of two legislative branch agencies, the Library of Congress and Government Publishing Office, and creates a new presidential appointment subject to Senate confirmation for the Registrar of Copyrights. And I do want to thank the sponsor of the bill and my colleague on the Committee on House Administration, Mr. Griffith, and Chairman Stile, and to both their staffs for working with us to improve prior versions of the legislation. And I do want to, for the legislative record, I'll probably repeat some of the things that my colleague has said, but the amended bill makes clear that the U.S. Copyright Office, in particular, currently part of the library, remains in the legislative branch, and it protects the Copyright Office workforce. All of them will continue to enjoy the same rights, privileges, and protections they hold today as library employees. That was very important to us. I have long said that the Library of Congress should be appointed by Congress, the librarian. And still, we must make this change thoughtfully and mindful of the consequences, particularly, again, for the Copyright Office. Copyright authority is enshrined in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Constitution, and the Copyright Office has resided in the legislative branch for well over a century. And I appreciate Mr. Griffith's comments about the 19th century and how different things were and the importance of doing all of this work. And this bill is really very important, particularly because so much of the work is legislative and because of the ability for the modern legislature to have responsibility here. All of that should remain within the legislature, remain within the Congress, and that's the intent of this bill. The copyright economy contributes, and this is really something of an astounding figure, more than $2 trillion to our economy each year, supports more than 11 million American jobs, and only with a stable, reliable, and apolitical copyright system will we continue to have the benefits of that economy. The bill helps preserve it at a critical moment for copyright stakeholders and the millions of library users. And I particularly point that out in the midst of the emergence of AI, which uses great many materials for learning that are copyrighted. So these issues continue to be in the public eye, and they'll continue to be important. The library and the Copyright Office have operated in partnership for more than 150 years. And the Copyright Office depends on the library's infrastructure, and the library builds its collections through copyright deposits. So severing that relationship would harm both institutions, something we clearly do not want to do. And the revised bill recognizes that. It establishes a significant transition period. It allows the Copyright Office to continue using library support services and requires the registrar to consult with the librarian before taking any action affecting the library's access to copyright deposits. It safeguards the rights of Copyright Office employees, as I indicated earlier, and keeps the office in the legislative branch where it belongs. And again, I want to thank Chairman Stile and certainly the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Griffith, for accepting these changes, for working in a cooperative, collaborative, and bipartisan spirit. It has taken a little while, but I think the final product is improved as a result of it. So for too long, Congress has allowed its own authority and capacity to atrophy. The library, the Copyright Office, the other support agencies we rely on are funded from a legislative branch budget that amounts to roughly 0.4% of all federal discretionary spending. If we're serious about legislating on questions as complex, as I mentioned, as AI and copyright, we must be serious about sustaining the institutions that make that work possible. So, there are challenges. I think this was work of compromise, so there are some changes that I think both sides would have liked to make, but this does ensure that the Librarian of Congress can be hired and fired only by Congress, and does so while preserving both the Library and Copyright Office as the preeminent institutions in their fields. And I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the comments of my colleague, Mr. Morelli. Agree with everything that he added and said, and some of which we overlapped, some of which we didn't, but this was truly a work where we were trying to do the right thing for the right purposes, and both sides worked together to reach what I think is actually a better bill. I know there were compromises, but it's a better bill than what we originally had, and I appreciate that. And with that, I reserve and am prepared to close whenever my colleague is.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, let me thank the sponsor of the bill, my friend, Mr. Griffith, for his hard work. Thank Chairman Stile for his partnership and working together to protect these important legislative branch agencies and Congress's Article I prerogatives. I urge my colleagues to support this very fine piece of legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6028, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6028 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2505.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2505, a bill to require the development of strategies and options to prevent the export to Iran of certain technologies related to unmanned aircraft systems and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, a gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material in H.R. 2505.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Was recognized.
I do rise in support of H.R. 2505, the Block the Use of Transatlantic Technology in Iranian-Made Drones Act. Iranian drones are being used to terrorize civilians and attack Americans and our allies throughout the world. Too often those drones contain technology that originated in the United States or in Europe. That should alarm every member of this body. Iran has become one of the world's leading exporters of unmanned aerial systems to rogue regimes and terrorist proxies. Its drones have been used by Russia to strike Ukrainian cities, energy infrastructure, and civilians. They have been supplied to Iranian-backed groups across the Middle East, and they are part of Iran's broader strategy to destabilize the region. Many of the components found in these drones are commercially available dual-use technologies, products that may have legitimate civilian applications but can be repurposed for lethal military use. Existing sanctions and export controls are clearly not enough. If American and allied technology is still ending up inside Iranian-made drones, then we need to identify the gaps, tighten the enforcement, and work more closely with our partners to stop it. And that is exactly what this bill does. It requires departments of commerce, state, defense to develop coordinated strategies and options to prevent Iran from acquiring U.S. and allied technologies used in unmanned aerial systems. It strengthens interagency coordination and engagement with our allies to ensure that we block Iran's access to drone technology. This is not just about Iran, it's about making sure American innovation is not exploited by our adversaries to kill innocent people. Every Iranian drone that reaches Russia, Hezbollah, the Houthis, or other malign actors strengthens America's enemies, and it puts lives at risk. I want to thank Mr. Keating for introducing this important piece of legislation, which passed out of the committee with broad bipartisan support, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2505. Mr. Speaker, I would just add this: Iranian drones are not just a regional threat. They are a global threat. They are being used to attack Ukraine, threaten Israel, empower terrorist proxies, and undermine international security. The United States cannot allow American or allied technology to become the backbone of Iran's drone arsenal. This bill helps to close those gaps. It's a common sense, low cost, high impact measure to protect U.S. technology, support our allies, and counter Iran's malign activities. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 2505, and I yield back.
Gentleman, does the gentleman reserve? Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 2505, the Block the Use of Transatlantic Technology in Iranian-Made Drones Act. I want to thank my colleague from Massachusetts, Representative Keating, for his leadership in advancing bipartisan efforts to counter Iran's drone program, a threat that continues to hound Ukraine, and now our own forces and allies in the Middle East. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Iran has exported thousands of Shahed drones to the Russian military, fueling attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. Now, Iranian drones continue to threaten and damage critical energy, military, and civilian infrastructure across the Middle East. Most recently, Iranian drones struck Kuwait International Airport, heavily damaging a passenger terminal, killing one person, wounding dozens more, and briefly closing the airfield. H.R. 2505 closes critical gaps in enforcement and aligns our intelligence and interdiction policies with our national security interests. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill to help ensure that the United States and European technologies smuggled by illicit intermediaries don't fuel Iran's drone program. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields the balance of his time. I'm sorry. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Reserve, prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr. Speaker, this bill closes a critical gap in enforcement to ensure that U.S. and European technologies don't fuel Iran's drone program. This is a common sense bill that will defend civilians and protect our allies and partners, and I encourage my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 2505, and I yield back as well.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2505? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3429.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3429, a bill to establish an interparliamentary dialogue to facilitate closer cooperation between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea on shared interests and values.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert any extraneous material on H.R. 3429.
Without objection.
and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3429, the U.S.-Japan ROK Trilateral Cooperation Act, introduced by House Foreign Affairs Committee's East Asia and Pacific Ranking Member, Ami Bera, to my left. I've learned during my time as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee that trust is the ultimate currency in foreign relations. Allies come to the United States with many asks for arms, for trade, for diplomatic support, and everything in between. Sometimes the United States can only judge these requests based on the trust that they have or have not built with the United States of America. This legislation is about building that trust with Japan and South Korea, and doing so with these two partners could not be more important. Japan and South Korea are key allies that are working together to resist aggression from the Chinese Communist Party and from North Korea, to prevent a Chinese attack on Taiwan, to reindustrialize, and to decouple our economies from China in strategic sectors. This is not about building lopsided alliances. This is about strengthening relationships that are good for America. This bill would cultivate these alliances by establishing a parliamentary dialogue program between 4 members from the House and 4 members from the Senate, and selected counterparts from the parliaments of Japan and South Korea. This is about ensuring that our allies' system in the Indo-Pacific can resist Beijing's aggression. With this important legislation, we'll be one step closer to ensuring that American allies and partners win this century. Mr. Speaker, Japan and South Korea are 2 of America's most important treaty allies in the Indo-Pacific. This legislation builds upon our long-standing alliance with these 2 countries, so we can ensure these relationships can survive the struggles to come to deter aggression from the Chinese Communist Party and North Korea. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve, but I am prepared to close as well.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3429, the U.S.-Japan ROK Trilateral Cooperation Act. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Representatives Wilson, Kelly, Castro, Smith, and the late Honorable Jerry Connolly, co-chairs of the Korea and Japan caucuses, for introducing this bill with me. Congressman Connolly was a tireless advocate for America's alliances and a strong believer in the power of trilateral cooperation between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. I am proud to see the House continuing his important work today. The Indo-Pacific is at the center of America's economic and strategic future. In the region, the United States faces a complex array of challenges, including authoritarian aggression, economic coercion, and emerging security threats. Our ability to address these challenges requires strong alliances and close coordination with our partners. The trilateral relationship between the United States, Japan, and the Republic of Korea is one of the most strategically significant partnerships that we have. These are 2 of our closest allies, democracies that share our values, our interests, and our commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The 2023 Camp David Leaders Summit marked a historic step forward in trilateral cooperation, leading to expanded collaboration on military exercises, ballistic missile defense, cybersecurity, development finance, maritime security, and science and technology. But strong partnerships need strong institutions. Since the Camp David Summit, all 3 countries have experienced changes in executive leadership. That reality underscores why we must create mechanisms that ensure trilateral cooperation endures beyond any single administration. This is exactly what H.R. 3429 seeks to accomplish. The bill codifies an annual interparliamentarian dialogue among the United States Congress, Japan's National Diet, and South Korea's National Assembly. It creates a formal mechanism for lawmakers from all 3 countries to meet regularly and coordinate on issues including defense, economic security, public health, and emerging technologies. The legislation establishes a bipartisan and bicameral congressional delegation to participate in these discussions, ensuring that congressional engagement remains consistent and sustained over time. Most importantly, this bill helps institutionalize trilateral cooperation so that our partnership continues to grow regardless of political transitions in any of the three countries. The bill sends a clear message. The United States is committed to the long-term cooperation with our allies in Japan and South Korea. It recognizes that our trilateral partnership is not simply a response to current challenges, but a strategic investment in a more secure, prosperous, and stable Indo-Pacific. I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for their support, and I urge a yes vote on H.R. 3429. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Reserved. Prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr. Speaker, diplomacy is key to peace because we are stronger together with our allies. Whether it's the challenges posed by North Korea or the People's Republic of China, trilateral cooperation is one of the critical ways to ensure that America and our two closest allies in Asia are working hand in hand toward our common interests and the advancement of peace and prosperity in the region. Congressional engagement with Japan and Korea will sustain long-term support and resources for trilateral cooperation. So I urge all my colleagues to support this measure. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman floor is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, yield myself the remainder of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Japan and South Korea are two of America's most important treaty allies in the Indo-Pacific. This legislation, again, it builds on our longstanding alliance with these two countries so that we can ensure these relationships can survive struggles to come. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge a yes vote on H.R. 3429, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3429? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1744 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1744, a bill to extend and authorize annual appropriations for the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom through fiscal year 2028.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 1744.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1744, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom Reauthorization Act of 2025. Congress created this commission, otherwise known as USCIRF, in 1998 with a clear statutory mandate to monitor conditions of religious freedom around the world and make recommendations to Congress and to the President to protect this right. Since then, Congress has reauthorized the Commission's operations, appropriations, and mandate numerous times. Under current law, USCIRF terminates on September 30th of this year. This bill reauthorizes the Commission through December of 2028. America was founded on the principle that all human beings are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. One of these, the very first laid on the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, is the right to freely exercise one's religion according to one's conscience. Yet throughout the world, believers suffer extreme persecution. Throughout history, tyrants and radical regimes always target religion first. In Nigeria, seemingly every week, Christians are massacred by radical Fulani Muslims wielding machetes and crying Allahu Akbar. Christians in China are forced to worship underground. In Nicaragua, the dictatorship has just forbidden Bibles from being brought into the country. Christians across much of the Middle East and South Asia are relegated to second-class citizens, harassed and discriminated against simply for professing their beliefs. Even in Europe, nations with freedom of religion enshrined in their constitutions, Christians who hold traditional biblical views on marriage, on gender, on sexuality, have been convicted under so-called hate speech laws. It's not only Christians who are persecuted globally. The Chinese Communist Party is right now committing a horrific genocide against Uyghurs. Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, Rohingya Muslims in Burma, Buddhists in Vietnam, and many more face severe restrictions on their religious freedom. USCIRF gives Congress tools to confront persecution and protect religious freedom. As Vice President Vance said last year, part of this country's moral leadership means recognizing in our foreign policy the difference between regimes that respect religious freedom and those that do not. USCIRF is a critical tool to that end. I want to thank my colleague to my right here, Mr. Smith of New Jersey, as well as Mr. Sherman of California, for leading this bipartisan effort, and Mr. Smith has been leading on this for many years. The bill advanced out of the committee unanimously, and I urge my colleagues to join in advancing it on the floor today. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Speaker, I rise today in support of this bill to reauthorize the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, through fiscal year 2028. Since its establishment 28 years ago, USCIRF has served as an independent, bipartisan watchdog, monitoring conditions on the ground and providing policy recommendations to Congress and the administration. Its work reinforces the principles reflected in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and helps ensure that our advocacy for religious freedom is consistent, credible, and universal. True religious liberty cannot mean protection for only a favored few. It should extend to all people. A consistent defense of freedom of thought, consciousness, religion, and belief or non-belief strengthens our voice globally and advances global stability, security, and prosperity. When governments suppress religious belief, broader repression often follows. In many parts of the world, severe restrictions on religion are an early warning sign of authoritarian consolidation and instability. And for these reasons, we need to reauthorize this commission so they can continue to do their good work. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from New Jersey, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Africa, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to first of all thank our very distinguished chairman for his strong leadership on religious freedom generally, but for this legislation as well. I do appreciate that so much. And Brad Sherman, who's the Democratic co-sponsor, I want to thank him as well for his leadership in backing this important reauthorization of the United States International Religious Freedom Commission. As I think members know, USCIRF was created, the acronym, of course, we all use for the Commission, by Congress to protect religious freedom through the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, an historic landmark law authored by Frank Wolf in 1998. USCIRF's high-quality reporting and high-profile commissioners influence the State Department's work on religious freedom, also provide the Congress with insights with its incisive commentary, making all of the work that all of us do, especially state, more transparent, honest, and effective. The Commission defends the universal right to freedom of religion abroad. It sponsors hearings, fact-finding trips, reviews reports from all comers, especially NGOs and others, religious communities who are unfortunately being repressed in many countries of the world, and they make very, very good recommendations that often are followed. I would also point out that I've probably chaired more than 700 hearings on human rights over these years. I've been here since the year 1980. I always want to have somebody from the Commission there, always. They come, they give whatever, name the country. They give their insights after a great deal of due diligence, and what a difference that makes in terms of our understanding of what's actually going on. USCIRF commissioners are appointed by the President and the congressional leadership. There's 9 of them, of both parties, so it's totally bipartisan. Last month, our former colleague, Vicky Hartzler, completed a distinguished term on the Commission, and none of you will be surprised to know that she was very active as chair of the Commission, did a magnificent job. She was appointed by Speaker Johnson, as was Maureen Ferguson, who also just completed her term and did so with great distinction. Again, I want to remind colleagues, it was our very good friend Frank Wolf who in 1998, with great legislative skill, commitment, and drive and passion, drove the adoption of a singularly important human rights law the International Religious Freedom Act, or IRFA. The law created a system for naming and taking action of what was now called countries of particular concern, or CPCs. History has shown that when the United States elevates religious freedom and that priority is conveyed to countries of particular concern, conditions often change for the positive. Prisoners of conscience gain their freedom, and progress is made towards the free exercise of religious liberty. As the author of the Frank Wolf International Religious Freedom Act of 2016, which updated Frank's legislation, I do follow the CPC recommendations very closely, and in that law we created entities of particular concern, like Boko Haram and some of these horrible organizations that kill people simply because of their faith. The USERF acts as a true watchdog, recommending with incisive commentary that the State Department designated countries, really, that they not leave somebody off because of political considerations. If they are committing human rights abuse against people of faith, they need to be held to account. CPC is followed by a two-step process. First, the designation, followed thereafter by sanctions, more than 18 of them prescribed in the law. We're hoping that they won't be used. We want to see real reform and people protected, like in China and elsewhere, from people who wish them ill. I want to again thank our members, Brad, Gus Bilirakis, Henry Cuellar, all the others who have supported this bill, and ask my colleagues to support the legislation. And I yield back to the chairman the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve and I am prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purposes of closing. Reauthorizing USERF would ensure continuity in its important work. Protecting religious freedoms abroad advances both our values and interests, and it promotes stability and respect for fundamental rights. Join me in supporting this bill, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the right to freely exercise your religion without fear of persecution is an unalienable right that belongs to all people. By passing this bill, the U.S. Congress is recommitting itself to that fundamental truth, that fundamental freedom. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I call upon the Senate to take up and pass H.R. 1744 as soon as possible, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1744 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6297 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6297, a bill to require the Department of State to provide briefings on anti-Semitism in Europe.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 6297.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, anti-Semitism and international terrorism in Europe are real threats that undermine regional stability, transatlantic security, and the safety of American citizens living abroad. This threat skyrocketed after Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack. France recorded over 1,000 anti-Semitic incidents in just 1 month alone. Germany experienced a 240% increase. More recent incidents further underscore that threat. On October 2, 2025, a deadly anti-Semitic attack at a Manchester synagogue during the Yom Kippur killed 2 and injured others. In March 2025, a 22-year-old was arrested in Madrid for attempting to set fire to Riman Kosher, a busy kosher restaurant. Authorities charged him with anti-Semitic hate crime, attempted murder, and arson. In March of 2026, 2 suspects on a motor scooter detonated an explosive device against the outer wall of an Orthodox Jewish school in Amsterdam. Also in March of 26, an explosive device detonated in front of a historic synagogue in Belgium during the early morning hours. Beyond anti-Semitic attacks, Europe continues to face threats from Islamic extremism. In February of 25, French authorities classified a deadly knife attack in Mulhouse as an Islamic terrorist act, while German authorities disrupted and investigated multiple suspected Islamist-inspired plots during 2025. This legislation builds on the Trump administration's effort to combat anti-Semitism, strengthen international counterterrorism cooperation. It ensures continued U.S. diplomatic engagement with European allies, and it requires regular consultations with Congress. I want to thank my colleague and the sponsor of this bill, Mr. Fine, for his leadership on the issue. The bill passed the Foreign Affairs Committee with broad bipartisan support, and I urge my colleagues to join me in advancing it on the floor today. And, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Speaker, I rise today in support of the Peace Act. Acts of anti-Semitism are on the rise globally. This is also true in Europe, where increasingly vocal fringe political movements, particularly far-right movements, are emboldened by increased political discourse on both sides of the Atlantic that harkens back to the unacceptable political rhetoric of old. Combating anti-Semitism has long been a priority for both Democratic and Republican administrations and has been a central element of U.S. foreign policy for years. This bill expresses the sense of Congress that the State Department should assess and address the threat of anti-Semitism in Europe and requires consultation with Congress on addressing these threats. So I support this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as he may consume to my colleague from Florida, Mr. Fine.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. One would have thought after October 7th, 2023, the world's worst attack against Jews since the Holocaust, which obviously took place in Europe, there would have been an outpouring of sympathy and less anti-Semitism in the world. In Europe in particular, that's not what happened. A study conducted by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights recorded an increase of up to 400% in anti-Semitic activity since October 7th. That same study also found that 96% of European Jews that were surveyed, 96%, almost every single one, said that they encounter anti-Semitism in their daily lives. Not once a month, not once a year, but every day in their actual existence. Crimes linked to anti-Semitism are on the rise all throughout Europe. Even our major allies in the region have seen a dramatic increase. France saw 1,600 anti-Semitic acts in 2024, a 300% increase since before October 7th. The United Kingdom had over 3,500 anti-Semitic incidents in 2024, up dramatically from the 1,600, which is still too many, that they had before October 7th, 2023. But statistics only show part of the picture. My friend and colleague, the chairman, gave some stories. What's remarkable is we didn't coordinate, and every story that he told is different than one that I am about to tell you. On February 11th in Paris, a 13-year-old Jewish boy was attacked by 5 men on his way to synagogue. 13 years old, 5 adult men. During the attack, he was called Jewish slurs by the perpetrators. On March 23rd in London, 4 ambulances operated by a Jewish charity were destroyed in an arson attack by 3 men. Now, these are stories that affect Europeans, but the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe affects Americans as well, particularly when we visit Europe. And so this isn't just about protecting European Jews, it's about protecting Americans when we go there. On April 29th of this year, 2 Jewish men were stabbed by someone who said he went out with the intention of stabbing people who looked visibly Jewish. One of the 2 was an American. On November 10th, 2025 in Milan, a Jewish American was attacked after he was identified based on his, quote, Orthodox Jewish attire. These are Americans being attacked in Europe. My bill would direct the State Department to assess the growing threat of anti-Semitism in Europe and provide diplomatic channels to make clear to our European allies that this conduct is simply unacceptable. After this assessment, the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs will engage with European countries that are identified as countries of concern to say, you've got to cooperate with us to deal with this rising anti-Semitism problem. This common sense bipartisan legislation passed through committee unanimously, 49-0. And I want to thank the co-sponsors of the bill, Republicans Max Miller, Mike Lawler, and Representative Claudia Tenney, but also Democrats Eugene Vindman and Laura Gillen. I'd also like to thank the chairman and the ranking member, both of whom have supported the bill, and I want to thank the majority leader for putting it on the floor today. Finally, I would just say this. We said after the Holocaust, never again. But the facts are there is a real risk of it happening. And so I would urge all of my colleagues to vote today to take this one small step to make sure that it doesn't happen ever again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield. If the gentleman's ready to close, I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I support this measure and encourage all my colleagues to do so as well. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the rise of anti-Semitic violence and terrorist attacks across Europe is a stark reminder that radical extremism is not a relic of the past. It is a clear and present danger to freedom, to democracy, and to Western civilization. The United States has to stand firmly with our allies, with the Jewish people, and with all those who reject terror and defend liberty. Peace through strength is not just a slogan. It is a necessity. Weakness invites aggression. Strength deters aggression. H.R. 6297 sends a clear message that America will continue to lead in confronting anti-Semitism and strengthening international efforts to combat terrorism. And I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back as well.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6297 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 5248 as amended.
Can the gentleman call up the bill as introduced?
Yes.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5248, a bill to ensure the alignment of economic and foreign policies to position the Department of State to reflect that economic security is national security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Berra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 5248.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 5248, the Profit Act, a bill that I am proud to have worked on with my colleague, Representative Young Kim, to my right. When I became chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, more than 80% of the State Department was unauthorized, meaning Congress really hadn't examined it in a long time. It had been decades since the department was forced to articulate its priorities and identify how it would align its resources. Programs that had long outlived their purpose had been allowed to continue, wasting taxpayer dollars. Entire offices and bureaus had become redundant. I am proud to say that today, because of the bills we passed into law last year, in addition to H.R. 5248, we have now authorized more than 55% of the State Department. Clearly, there's still more work to be done. Within the department, the bureaus and offices that support the Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment are at the tip of the spear for implementing the America First foreign policy. These are the offices charged with leveling the playing field so American companies can compete and win overseas. This bill codifies the administration's America First foreign policy agenda by ensuring those offices and bureaus are aligned to advance our economic interests. As the President has repeatedly said, economic security is national security, and economic policy is foreign policy. Mr. Speaker, I will pause on that and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 5248, and I want to thank Representative Young Kim and Chairman Mast for working to move this package of economic diplomacy measures in a bipartisan manner. This bill highlights the critical importance of the State Department's E-family of bureaus, which engage in critical diplomacy related to energy and supply chains around the world. They help enhance America's economic security by engaging in bilateral and multilateral cooperation on issues ranging from critical minerals to space to our oceans and the environment. The bill codifies economic diplomacy elements and functions at the State Department. The bill establishes a Bureau for Energy Security and Diplomacy and a new Assistant Secretary for Sanctions Policy to coordinate and strengthen sanctions policies at the State Department. It codifies existing bureaus such as the Water, Environment, and Space Affairs Bureaus, the Economic and Business Affairs Bureau, as well as the Office of the Chief Economist and the Office of Subnational Diplomacy. Taken together, this bill will make economic statecraft a more central part of the State Department and elevate the importance of economic security and commercial diplomacy as critical elements of U.S. foreign policy. I support this measure and urge all my colleagues to do the same. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlelady from California, Chairwoman of the Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific, Ms. Kim.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 5248, the Producing Returns and Opportunity for Investment and Trade or Profit Act. I want to thank Chairman Mast for your leadership on this bill, working with us. This is a bipartisan bill, and it is the result of months of collaborative work by the East Asia and the Pacific Subcommittee and my staff. I thank Chairman Mast for your leadership and getting us this far. Your initiative to prioritize State Department reauthorization as part of a broader all-of-committee effort is already delivering results. Before last year's NDAA, nearly 85% of the department was unauthorized. But with the passage of H.R. 5248, Chairman Mast will have pushed through legislation to bring that authorization level well above 50%. That is truly an amazing achievement. I would also like to thank Ranking Member Mix. During the September 2025 committee markup, he rightly called this bill, in quote, a distinct bright spot, end quote, in the authorizing process due to its strong bipartisan refinement. I'm delighted that we have been able to bring this bill to the House floor under suspension today. Passing H.R. 5248, alongside other State Department authorization legislation, fulfills a core responsibility of the Foreign Affairs Committee, producing an annual authorization bill. Regrettably, the committee has neglected this fundamental duty for over 2 decades, and that costs of that neglect have grown steadily. Without regular authorizations, we cede policy direction to other committees and must rely on their vehicles to advance our priorities. Oversight suffers as the department becomes less responsive, delaying witnesses, ignoring document requests and briefings, and we fall short of our Article 1 constitutional responsibilities. Unchecked, the department, like most government agencies, expands, loses focus, and accumulates bloat. Bureaus and offices created to serve one administration's priorities persist, layering new offices on top of old ones and creating redundancy and inefficiency. The Department of State that this administration inherited was rife with bloat, government waste, and slowed decision-making. The Profit Act is a critical step to restoring regular order to the authorization process. It codifies what President Trump repeatedly said: economic security is national security, and economic policy is foreign policy. This bill aligns bureaus and offices under the Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment, placing commercial diplomacy at the forefront of America First foreign policy. It signals strong support to American companies in critical minerals, energy, and related sectors. The department will work to open markets, reduce dangerous supply chain dependence on China and other adversaries, and level the playing field so U.S. firms can compete and win abroad. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a vital piece of the committee's broader efforts. At a time of unprecedented challenges to our economic sovereignty, the department's tools must be fit for the purpose. H.R. 5248 equips it to prioritize economic statecraft and deliver results for years to come. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, I was just alerted that there is a technical error with the version of the bill that was submitted, so we are going to enjoy the debate that we just had, but we're going to withdraw the motion.
The motion is withdrawn. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6230 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6230, a bill to designate certain individuals as specially designated global terrorists.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, the gentleman from California, Mr. Barrow, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 6230.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation addresses a simple but important question. When senior officials of the Iranian regime call for violence, incite terrorism, or encourage attacks against Americans and our allies, are we using every tool available to hold them accountable? Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. It has armed, funded, directed terrorist proxies across the Middle East. It has targeted American service members, threatened U.S. officials, and plotted attacks abroad. In the 30 months prior to Operation Epic Fury, there were over 350 attacks by Iran against the United States of America. Yet many of the individuals and institutions responsible for this conduct continue to operate because of weak sanctions. H.R. 6230 addresses that problem. This bill requires the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Treasury to regularly assess whether key Iranian leaders, clerics, and Iran-backed proxies meet the criteria for designation under existing U.S. terrorism, human rights, and sanctions authorities. This legislation does not create new sanctions programs. It does not mandate designations. Instead, it ensures that the administration conducts regular, transparent reviews and reports its findings to Congress so that we can determine whether the existing authorities are being fully utilized. I want to thank the sponsors of this legislation for their leadership in advancing this important measure, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6230. And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the passage of H.R. 6230, a bill that seeks to apply standard International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, property blocking sanctions against a set of Iranian religious and government figures, as well as the institutions they represent, who have publicly threatened the life of the President of the United States and allied leaders. No matter my disagreement with the President and his policies, these threats are unacceptable. The bill also includes reasonable waiver authorities that allow the executive branch to scale these sanctions up or down, preserving diplomatic leverage. To be clear, many of the sanctions targets, and in some cases their entire networks, are already subject to U.S. sanctions under current authorities. Additional listings may feel satisfying, but they will not on their own cause a meaningful change in Iran's calculus or behavior. Sanctions by themselves are not a strategy, and they are not a substitute for one. What we need from the Trump administration in the end to end this costly war, followed by a clear articulation on an Iran strategy that protects the American people, supports our partners, and restores credible diplomacy. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from the second most patriotic state in the nation. He's from Texas. I'm from Florida, number one, of course. The chairman of the Subcommittee on Europe, Mr. Self.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 6230, the Tehran Incitement to Violence Act. This bill would require a sanctions determination for Iranian clerics, organizations, and regime-linked entities for issuing and amplifying fatwas that explicitly call for the deaths of political leaders. These sanctions would include property blocking sanctions and total immigration bans to deter such deadly incitement. By passing this bill, Congress sends an unmistakable message. The United States will never accept death threats. I would like to thank Chairman Mast and Ranking Member Minks for supporting this common-sense bipartisan bill in markup. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I have no further requests for time. I'm prepared to close. The other side is prepared to close.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill because the threats made against the United States President and others by those this legislation targets are completely unacceptable. I encourage my colleagues to support this measure and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Iranian regime and its affiliates have spent decades spreading terror, exporting instability, and threatening the United States of America and our allies. H.R. 6230 ensures that those responsible are not overlooked in any way and that the administration continually evaluates whether they should be held accountable under existing U.S. law. This is a common sense measure, strengthens oversight, reinforces deterrence, supports our broader effort to counter Iran's malign activities, and I urge my colleagues vote yes on H.R. 6230, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the Bill H.R. 6230 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7037 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7037, a bill to promote United States and allied energy and mineral security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, a gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 7037, the Dominance Act, introduced by Chairwoman Kim and Ranking Member Barra. Battles are won with the right tools and the right team, often before the first shot is ever fired. Today, America's readiness depends on more than just troops, tanks, and ships. It depends on supply chains that power our economy and power our military. The minerals used in fighter jets, missile systems, semiconductors, advanced communication technologies, and energy infrastructure are essential to American strength. When those supply chains are vulnerable, the United States of America is in turn vulnerable. For decades, Beijing pursued a deliberate strategy to dominate critical mineral supply chains. Today, China controls much of the world's processing and refining capacity for the minerals that underpin our industrial base and our national defense. Last year, Beijing reminded the world how easy it can weaponize that dominance when it restricted exports of critical rare earth materials, disrupting global markets without firing a shot. Congress cannot afford to ignore that warning. That is why I'm proud to be a supporter of the Dominance Act. This legislation strengthens America's ability to work with our allies, mobilize investment, and build resilient supply chains for critical minerals and energy technologies our economy and our military depend on. I want to commend Chairwoman Kim, Ranking Member Bera, for their leadership on this issue. And Mr. Speaker, the readiness of our country cannot be improvised. It has to be protected every day, and I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 7037, the Developing Overseas Mineral Investments and New Allied Networks for Critical Energies Act, or the Dominance Act. Over the past year, through hearings, briefings, and engagement with industry, government, and our international partners, one fact has become increasingly clear. Securing reliable access to critical minerals is not a Democratic or Republican issue, it's an American issue. Today, the People's Republic of China controls roughly 90% of global rare earth processing capacity. That concentration creates a strategic vulnerability to the United States and our allies, and Beijing has demonstrated its willingness to leverage that dominance through export restrictions and other forms of economic coercion. The United States must continue expanding domestic mining, processing, refining, and recycling capacity. But building secure and resilient supply chains cannot be accomplished by the United States acting alone. We need stronger partnerships with trusted allies and partners. We need coordinated investment strategies. And we need a whole-of-government approach that aligns our diplomatic, development, and economic tools to reduce dependence on vulnerable supply chains. This is exactly what the Dominance Act does. The bill establishes a Bureau of Energy Security and Diplomacy at the Department of State, led by Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary. This bureau will serve as the focal point for U.S. international energy and critical minerals policy, ensuring greater coordination across agencies and stronger engagement with allies and partners. This diplomatic capacity is increasingly important in a world where geopolitical instability, such as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, can disrupt energy markets with significant economic consequences for our country and our constituents. Second, the legislation formally authorizes the United States participation in the Forum on Resource Geostrategic Engagement, or FORGE. FORGE builds upon the successful work of the Biden administration's Minerals Security Partnership by bringing together like-minded countries to coordinate investments, share information, and advance strategic partnerships and projects that strengthen supply chain resilience. Authorizing U.S. participation ensures that America remains at the table, working with our partners to diversify sources of critical minerals and reduce reliance on strategic competitors. Third, the bill creates energy security pacts that align the capabilities of the State Department, the Development Finance Corporation, XM, USTDA, MCC, the Department of Commerce, and other agencies in support of strategic energy and mineral projects overseas. These partnerships will help mobilize private sector investment, strengthen economic resilience, support developing economies, and counter efforts by authoritarian governments to use economic dependence as a tool of coercion. The legislation also invests in the workforce needed to secure our energy future. It expands educational and workforce development opportunities through initiatives such as the Critical Minerals Mining Fellowship Program and the Visiting Mining Scholars Program, helping develop the expertise needed to support secure and sustainable mineral supply chains. Lastly, the bill strengthens U.S. diplomatic and national security capacity by expanding Foreign Service Institute training on energy and critical minerals issues and codifying a special advisor for critical minerals and supply chains on the National Security Council to help coordinate whole-of-government strategy. Taken together, these provisions represent a comprehensive approach to one of the most important strategic challenges facing our country. The Dominance Act sends a clear message that the United States is committed to working with allies and partners to build secure, diversified, and resilient critical mineral supply chains. It also provides the certainty that businesses and investors need to make long-term investments in transparent, sustainable, and secure energy and mineral projects around the world. I want to thank Chairwoman Young Kim for her partnership on this important bill. I'm proud that this bill received a unanimous vote in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlelady from California, Chairwoman of the Subcommittee on East Asia and Pacific, Ms. Kim.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 7037, the Developing Overseas Mineral Investments and New Allied Networks for Critical Energies, or Dominance Act. Critical minerals are the foundation of military power, industrial strength, and economic security. They enable fighter jets, semiconductors, batteries, and energy infrastructure. They increasingly determine which nations lead the modern world and which ones fall behind. Today, far too many of these supply chains are controlled by China, creating a strategic vulnerability the United States cannot afford to ignore. Over the past year, Congress has taken a serious look at this challenge. And last July, the Foreign Affairs Committee's East Asia and the Pacific Subcommittee held a hearing on breaking China's chokehold on critical mineral supply chains. The message was clear. America must boost domestic production while building a coordinated strategy with our allies and trusted partners. We have also spent the past year listening to the companies, manufacturers, and investors building these supply chains, including Freeport-McMoRan, MP Materials, Cobalt Metals, and the National Association of Manufacturers. And earlier this year, my colleague Congressman Berra and I traveled to Peru to see firsthand the opportunities and challenges facing critical mineral development. Across all of these conversations, one consistent theme emerged. America needs a durable, long-term strategy. The Trump administration has advanced important initiatives such as Forge, Pax Silica, and Project Vault. I want to recognize administration officials David Copley, Jacob Helberg, and Ben Black for their leadership in advancing America's energy and mineral security interests. Yet, Congress must ensure these efforts endure beyond any single administration. As China executes a decades-long plan, America cannot afford to shift strategies every few years. That is why Representative Berra and I introduced the Bipartisan Dominance Act. This legislation aligns America's diplomatic, financing, and strategic tools to strengthen critical mineral and energy supply chains with our trusted partners. So I thank my Congressman Pete Stover of Minnesota, Chairman of the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources, for his leadership on domestic mining. I also want to thank Congressman Rob Whitman for his leadership on strengthening our defense industrial base, and Congressman John Molinar for confronting the challenges posed by the Chinese Communist Party. The Dominance Act complements their work by ensuring international efforts reinforce, not replace, U.S. domestic production and industrial resilience. The bill established the Bureau of Energy Security and Diplomacy at the State Department. It creates long-term energy security pacts with our allies and partners, And it authorizes the Forum on Resource and Geostrategic Engagement, FORGE, and improves interagency coordination. It supports key investments in energy supply chains, launches mining fellowship and exchange programs to build future talent, and codifies key White House positions and requires specialized training for foreign service officers in critical posts around the world. This legislation is about economic security. It is about industrial strength, and it is about national security. The United States must stop depending on China for the materials that power the modern world. The Dominance Act ensures America and its allies, not our adversaries, shape the future of global energy and critical mineral supply chains. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield the balance of my time.
Reserve, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation would strengthen critical mineral supply chains by bolstering U.S. cooperation with our allies and partners, institutes needed reforms at the State Department, and makes our supply chains more resilient and less susceptible to the type of chokeholds that the PRC has employed against us. The Dominance Act is a critical step forward, and I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. And I thank the partnership of Chairwoman Kim as well as Chairman Mast and all the others that put this legislation together. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, critical minerals are the lifeblood of American industry, our military-industrial complex, so many items or tools that we use in our day-to-day way of life. This bill, it's an important step towards reasserting control over what is the American economic destiny. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 7037, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 8665.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8665, a bill to require the implementation of a strategy to encourage foreign partners to participate in the foreign military sales and direct commercial sales processes on multinational bases and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barrett, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 8665.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it has long been recognized by our partners and our allies the American foreign military sales system is slow, inefficient, and it's opaque. While the benefits outweigh the cost for many of our closest allies, it takes a real investment of personnel, time, and resources for our foreign partners to be able to successfully participate in our foreign military sales. American-made defense systems remain the most effective and advanced and sought after in the world, but we need to keep expanding our base of foreign partners who purchase American defense systems. H.R. 8665, the Allied Defense Sales Act, is a bipartisan effort to break down barriers for smaller allies, smaller countries who do not have a long-standing defense sales relationship with the United States. This bill allows smaller countries to pool resources and participate in the foreign military sales system, expanding America's circle of equipped, interoperable allies without requiring new foreign aid spending. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Zinke of Montana, the sponsor of this bill, who led the House Foreign Affairs Committee Arms Sales Task Force and has continued his important work of ensuring America remains the partner of choice for foreign defense sales. This legislation, it passed the Foreign Affairs Committee with broad bipartisan support. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting it on the floor today. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Speaker, I rise today in support of a bill I co-led with Representative Zinke regarding the promotion of multi-country defense article purchases, which can result in lower prices, greater efficiencies, and interoperability for our allies and partners. While most foreign defense sales are conducted by individual countries as purchasers, multi-country purchases can provide more competitive pricing, coordination, and other benefits, including for smaller countries which are less frequent purchasers, as well as multinational alliances. The bill directs the Secretary of State to develop and implement a strategy to encourage U.S. foreign partners to participate in foreign military sales, FMS, and direct commercial sales, DCS, processes on a multinational basis. The bill also includes reporting requirements providing Congress with details on this strategy and its implementation. While multinational purchases are not currently prohibited by statute, this bill requires a strategy for socializing, promoting, and making available said options for multinational cases to purchasing countries and an accompanying report to Congress. This will be beneficial to both the U.S. and our partners and allies and provides helpful additional information to Congress as we conduct necessary oversight over this initiative. Therefore, I am pleased to support it and encourage my colleagues to do so as well, and I yield back. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlelady from California, chairwoman of the Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific, Ms. Kim.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 8665, the Allied Defense Sales Act. As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee's Foreign Military Sales Task Force, I am proud to co-sponsor this bipartisan bill introduced by our task force chair, Representative Zinke. H.R. 8665 is a practical step forward to strengthen our defense industrial base while reinforcing partnerships with trusted partners. America produces the most advanced and reliable defense systems in the world. Our partners across Europe, Asia, and beyond consistently prefer U.S. equipment for its quality, performance, and the security relationships that come with it. Yet, many smaller nations face significant obstacles when pursuing individual purchases. The administrative burden, minimum order sizes, and unpredictable timelines often discourage sales that would otherwise benefit both our allies and American industry. H.R. 8665 addresses these challenges head-on. The bill directs the State Department to develop a clear strategy for enabling multinational procurement. A partner nation would agree to serve as the lead nation to enable a multinational procurement, ensuring other qualified allies are able to participate in foreign military sales. By combining demand, we can achieve more predictable production schedules, lower unit costs, faster deliveries, and greater overall efficiency for manufacturers here at home. This model also improves interoperability among our partners, allowing them to work more seamlessly alongside U.S. forces and with one another. The legislation requires the Department to assess allied interest, identify suitable lead coordinators, examine financing options for partners who may not qualify for standard programs, and address regulatory hurdles under existing export laws, and highlight opportunities to make more U.S. capabilities available for export. The Department will need to regularly report to Congress on implementation and on its results. In an era when competitors are aggressively marketing their systems abroad, we must make it easier for allies to choose American. This bill does that without compromising our rigorous oversight or security standards. It supports good-paying jobs in defense manufacturing hubs nationwide, including in Orange and Riverside counties in my district, which many aerospace and defense primes, SMEs, and startups call home. And it enhances collective deterrence and advances U.S. foreign policy that prioritizes both economic strength and strategic advantage. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 8665 is a common sense step forward. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting its passage, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Reserve and prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose
The gentleman
of
is
closing.
recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill will promote multi-country defense article purchases that will, in practice, lower prices, boost interoperability, and provide other benefits. It will help streamline these purchases, including for multinational alliances and smaller countries. I support this bill and encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is essential that we do everything that we can to equip our allies, big and small, with the best U.S. defense technology, ensuring that we remain interoperable with our partners in a conflict. This legislation is a key step forward to strengthening the U.S. defense industrial base and bolstering our allies' defense capabilities with the best equipment anywhere on the globe, United States of American equipment, which is generations beyond everybody else's. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8665, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 8665? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. This gentleman from Florida seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7668 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7668, a bill to require a report on Russian and Chinese intelligence assets in Georgia and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 7668.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I
The
may
gentleman is
consume.
recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 7668, the Countering China's Control of the Caucasus Act, introduced by my colleague to my right here from South Carolina, Mr. Joe Wilson. Now, over the last few years, there have been serious questions raised about the status of democracy and the prevalence of malign influence from U.S. adversaries in the Republic of Georgia. To this day, Russia occupies 20% of Georgia's sovereign territory following its 2008 invasion. Despite efforts to militarily resist Russia, concerns remain over Russia's long-standing influence in Georgia. Equally concerning is the influence of the People's Republic of China within the country. In the last few years, this led to a Chinese consortium being selected over a U.S. company for developing a massive seaport project. Competition is good, but when it comes to critical infrastructure like this, our partners should take into consideration the risk posed by the PRC. This bill would require an assessment of Russian and Chinese intelligence activities and influence within the Republic of Georgia and identify any areas of cooperation between Russia and China within Georgia. The bill would also require a strategy for the future relationship between the United States and Georgia and help us assess if Georgia is serious about a path of improved relations. I want to thank again my colleague, Mr. Wilson of South Carolina, for introducing this effort, and I urge my colleagues to advance this bill today, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 7668, a bipartisan bill designed to make sure the United States is clear-eyed about the threats from Russia and the PRC in Georgia, as well as whether Georgia remains committed to a relationship with the United States and Europe centered around shared values and interests. In this spirit, I thank my good friend, Representative Wilson, for his tireless work in support of the Georgian people and for bringing forward this legislation, which builds on his work on the Megobari Act. In recent years, the current Georgian Dream government, as well as foreign malign influence from Russia and China in Georgia, have threatened Georgia's hard-fought democratic gains, corrupted some of its state institutions, and caused a rift in the U.S.-Georgia relations and between the Georgian government and its people. This legislation, along with the Megabari Act that this body passed with overwhelming bipartisan support last year, is a response to this deterioration. The goal is to let the Georgian people know that we stand by them in their quest for democracy, respect for their rights, and deeper integration in the Euro-Atlantic community. This legislation ensures we are clear-eyed about what that continued support from the U.S. to Georgia will require, and provides a framework for appropriate cooperation with the Georgian government going forward. I am pleased with this bipartisan work on this bill and look forward to its passage. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, who I suspect will tell us something about war criminal Putin.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
And thank you very much, Chairman Brian Mast, for being so perceptive. With this today, I rise today in support of H.R. 7668, the Countering China's Control Act, to reassure the people of Georgia. The illegitimate Georgian Dream Team regime is in the process of selling out the country to the Chinese Communist Party, criminal Putin, and Iran against the wishes of the Georgian people and the interest of the United States. The election was rigged in Georgia. With this, they have peddled the vilest anti-American propaganda and constantly insult President Trump, accusing him of acting, quote, as an agent of the deep state, end of quote. In fact, we also know that the legitimate president, Salome Zoraishvili, has been a valued guest for the inauguration of President Donald Trump, and almost daily there are demonstrations in Tbilisi where people carry giant posters of President must run through Georgia, and the Chinese Communist Party is set, as the chairman has identified, to own and control the strategic deep port of the region, Anathia Port, on the Black Sea. Congratulations to Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and neighboring Armenia on his astounding election victory yesterday. And unlike Georgian Dream, Pashinyan is working with the United States and with President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan to remove Russian influence in the region and normalize relations with the NATO ally, our very valued and appreciated ally Turkey. This is a once in a 3,000-year opportunity for stability, peace, and prosperity in the region, and I'm grateful for President Trump orchestrating the peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Georgian Dream nightmare regime, with fair and free elections, must abandon its anti-American course, release political prisoners and politically motivated prosecutions, ensure a fair election environment, revoke draconian laws that are suffocating U.S. businesses, and seek to end the repression of free speech. The Countering China's Control of the Caucasus Act ensures that Chinese and Russian covert operations in the country are brought to light, and the United States strongly considers whether Georgia should remain a top recipient of aid while it attacks America and its propaganda on an almost daily basis. Georgian troops have fought bravely with Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq, along with our chairman, and we know that Georgia has been a close partner and ally of the United States. We must reestablish the strong relationship that has been between the United States and Georgia. It will not be able to normalize unless we have fair and free elections. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the utmost attention to this issue, and I reserve, but I am prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 7668 does not seek to demonstrate to the people of Georgia that the United States remains committed to its Euro-Atlantic aspirations. So I again thank my good friend Representative Wilson for his steadfast support of the Georgian people and hope my colleagues will join me in supporting the support of this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's time for the United States and Georgia to move forward but doing so requires clarity on what's happening in their country behind the scenes and a responsible strategy for future engagement. I urge my colleagues to support this measure to better inform U.S. policy toward the Republic of Georgia. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 7668, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill. Insert extraneous material on H.R. 6338.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 6338, the Stop Illegal Fishing Act, led by Chairwoman Kim and Ranking Member Meeks. Illegal fishing is a national security problem. The Chinese Communist Party uses so-called commercial fishing fleets as an instrument of state power. These vessels violate sovereign waters, undermine local economies, and in the end, they support Beijing's broader campaign of coercion around the globe. This is not simply about catching fish. It's about the CCP using economic pressure, maritime intimidation, and lawless behavior to expand its influence and weaken the sovereignty of other nations. For years, China has operated in the world's worst illegal and unreported and unregulated fishing fleet. The United States cannot allow this behavior to continue without consequences. The Stop Illegal Fishing Act gives our government additional tools to identify, expose, and hold accountable those responsible for illegal fishing and the networks that do enable it. Just as importantly, it sends a clear message that the United States stands for free and open oceans governed by rules, not governed by coercion. I want to thank Chairwoman Kim and Ranking Member Meeks for their leadership on this bipartisan legislation, and I absolutely urge all members to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of Ranking Member Meeks' legislation, H.R. 6338, the Stop Illegal Fishing Act. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is a threat to the economic security, environment, and sovereignty of small island nations, including our partners in the Pacific Islands. For many Pacific Island nations, the ocean is their greatest natural resource. Fisheries support livelihoods, government revenues, and the well-being of communities. Yet too often, foreign vessels engage in illegal fishing practices that deplete fish stocks, undermine local economies, and erode the ability of Pacific nations to manage their own maritime resources. These activities can also fuel broader instability and coercive behavior in a region that is central to America's strategic interests. The United States has made a commitment to deepen our partnership with Pacific Island countries and to support a free, open, and resilient Pacific. By strengthening consequences for those who engage in illegal fishing, this legislation helps protect marine resources, support sustainable fisheries, and stand with our Pacific partners as they defend their economic futures. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve, but I am prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, illegal fishing is an issue around the world. Countries like China, Iran, and Russia are willfully or at best negligently violating international law, undermining human rights, and hurting communities for their own benefit. It's time to put a stop to this. I urge all my colleagues to support the Stop Illegal Fishing Act, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the United States will not stand by while China uses economic coercion as an intimidation tactic. This bill is an important reminder to show our allies and our partners in the Indo-Pacific, we're the United States of America. We do not back down. So I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 6338, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 5248, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5248, a bill to ensure the alignment of economic and foreign policies to position the Department of State to reflect that economic security is national security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 5248.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlelady from California, chairwoman of the Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific, Ms. Kim.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that my remarks on the previous version of this bill be moved to this point in debate in the congressional record.
Without objection.
I yield. Thank you.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized. The gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I will close, Mr. Speaker. I urge the support of H.R. 5428, and I yield as well.
The gentleman yields. The question is, would the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 5248 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.